they're abusing the system and sort of bringing in medium to low wage workers to
How many of them are at Meta or at Microsoft?
Well, I mean,
or at
listen,
St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, or at MD Anderson, where they have people
in the White House.
I'm not arguing against H-1Bs. I'm just saying the percentage of those visas that go to life sciences is 1.9%. Mathematics and physical sciences, 2.9%. 4.4% go to medicine and health.
Right, but what percentage of the economy is that? It's probably, I bet you it's pretty close to that.
65% of H-1B visas go to computer-related jobs.
Yeah.
In today's video, Abby Phillip takes on Ben Ferguson on News Night with Abby Phillip as the two collide over Donald Trump's sudden change of direction on immigration, and while Ben Ferguson keeps trying to justify Trump's constant back and forth, Abby Phillip slices through every excuse by anchoring the discussion in real facts about America's worker shortage, China's increasing global competition, and how the MAGA approach to immigration keeps contradicting itself again and again, and as Ben struggles to reshape the conversation, Abby Phillip continues exposing every weak point with sharp, straightforward arguments, so let's jump in and see how Abby Phillip completely shuts down Ben Ferguson on News Night with Abby Phillip.
Let's talk facts for a second.
Many people
Wait
in
a
the
second.
world who
Let's
think that
put
we
it
just
through
let
reality
too many people
check.
in, legal or
Number one economy on earth, the American economy. How was it built? Immigration. Look, after the Second World War, the scientists we brought into this country, we curate the best, we bring them here to create jobs and companies. What's going on right now in policy that I don't agree with is, I teach at Harvard and at MIT and many other colleges, if we curate these amazing students from all over the world, and we bring them into a cohort to train them how to become entrepreneurs in America. They want to stay.
Yep,
if we don't do it,
the
Chinese will.
Totally.
So I'm just saying, let's figure this out. Do we want the Chinese to train them, or do we want them? We want them, every single one of them, to stay here, and I want them to get their passports, and their families get passports, they'll create jobs, and I will invest in them. Every single one of them.
Can I just ask a real quick question? $100,000 per H-1B. Does that make sense?
It's nuts. That's a crazy idea.
Okay, let me explain to you about the $100,000, and let me explain to you why Donald Trump has changed his tune on H-1Bs. Because today, he hangs out with the CEOs of the big tech companies, right? They were at the front row of his swearing in. They come to the White House all the time. They're the ones funding his ballroom. They're the ones donating to any pet project that he wants. I'm talking about Tim Cook and Bezos and Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and all of those folks.
All those big Democrat donors.
Okay, all of those folks who have Trump's ear are telling him how important H-1Bs are to their businesses. Right. Why the $100,000 fee? Because there's only 65,000 H-1Bs available in the country every year. And there's almost 500,000 people that apply, companies that apply. What happens now is that the Googles and the Microsofts and the Amazons are going to edge out the community hospitals in rural areas. Amazon is number one. They can afford to pay the $100,000. The rural hospital in Iowa cannot pay.
They're already edging them out. 13,000 H-1Bs in 2025 so far have gone to Amazon. Meta is behind at 6,000. Microsoft, Tata, Google, Apple, Walmart.
By the way, if you want,
so before the 100,000, everybody was competing on an even field.
Let me raise one more thing about this. The H-1B issue, I think, is just one part of this. I think Trump is also trying to spin this now to make it as if it is not actually about the Amazons, the Metas, the Microsofts. Here is Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, talking about who, according to him, is coming in via these H-1B visas, and we'll talk.
This really highlights the deep gap between Kevin O'Leary's talking points and the actual realities of the U.S. immigration system, and Abby Phillip along with Ana Navarro aren't pushing back just to argue but to remind him of something he keeps skipping over, which is how big tech and political power quietly shape immigration policy behind the scenes. And that matters because Kevin's claim about picking only the brightest minds only explains part of the picture, since the U.S. definitely gains from global talent, but the current system mostly channels opportunities toward the largest corporations instead of supporting the wider American economy, and research from the National Foundation for American Policy shows that more than 70% of new H-1 H-1B certifications go to a few massive companies, giving them control over the labor pipeline while leaving smaller businesses, especially in healthcare and research, unable to compete, which is why Abby and Anna are right to call out that imbalance, because it directly affects rural hospitals, universities, and mid-sized employers that desperately need skilled workers but don't have Amazon-level budgets. And another key issue is how Kevin frames the idea that lowering immigration somehow hands victory to China, when the truth is far more complex, because the US is already dealing with enormous backlogs in employment-based visas, with some people waiting 10 to 20 years for a green card thanks to outdated country limits. So attracting talent isn't the difficult part, but the real setback is the slow bureaucracy, long processing delays, and a system shaped more by corporate lobbying than a national strategy, which is exactly why Abby and Anna's pushback matters, since they're showing that Trump's constant changes aren't about real principles but about staying close to powerful influencers. And when an administration's immigration policies shift wildly depending on which billionaire is offering advice, that isn't reform at all but political favoritism disguised as economic policy. And that's the context that makes Kevin's entire argument collapse the moment actual facts enter the conversation.
I think the president's vision here is to bring in overseas workers where these jobs went.
Who have skills.
Who have the skills, 3, 5, 7 years to train the U.S. workers. Then they can go home, the U.S. workers fully take over.
So do you understand the concern that people have? Hey, an American could have that job. Why you give it to a guy from
But an American can't have that job.
So
because,
it's specific skills.
Because we haven't built ships in the U.S. for years. We haven't built semiconductors. So this idea of overseas partners coming in, teaching American workers, then returning home, that's a home run.
So, a couple things about that. First of all, the hand-holding was amusing in that clip. But the H-1Bs right now are not going to shipbuilders.
Because they don't build ships here.
Well, yeah,
I mean,
but also
that's
because if you're building, if you're building ships for the U.S. military, you're probably not doing it on an H-1B. That's the first thing. But the second thing is they're trying to sort of like shoehorn this policy into their tariff policy, and it's really not that. I do think the H-1B program needs some attention. It needs some degree of reform.
Abby, do you want the next Einstein to come to America or to Shanghai? What do you want?
It's about fighting for talent and people that are brilliant.
I'm not fighting against an H-1B visa, folks. I'm the daughter of immigrants. Both my parents are naturalized citizens of this country.
So you should be for bringing people here.
I am saying there are real concerns that people have about companies that abuse the system.
We're talking about genius, bringing 65,000 geniuses to America.
Kevin, you know that it is not just geniuses. They're abusing the system and sort of bringing in medium to low wage workers to
How many of them are at Meta or at Microsoft? Well, or at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital or at MD Anderson, where they have people come in.
I'm not arguing against H-1Bs. I'm just saying the percentage of those visas that go to life sciences is 1.9%. Mathematics and physical sciences, 2.9%. 4.4% go to medicine and health.
Right, but what percentage of the economy is that? It's probably, I bet you it's pretty close to that.
65% of H-1B visas go to computer-related jobs.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that?
What's wrong? It's technology.
All I am saying is that actually, I think you're right.
When you really pull back and look at what Abby is pushing back against, it becomes obvious why her argument connects with so many people working in industries shaped by the H-1B system, because Kevin and Ben keep trying to sell this idea that every visa holder is some extraordinary, once-in-a-generation mastermind, even though the reality is far more complex, and Abby is the only one acknowledging that nuance. Since yes, the United States clearly gains from international expertise, but pretending the program isn't being misused is simply not truthful, especially when the Department of Labor has repeatedly flagged cases where companies used H-1Bs to replace American employees with lower-paid workers, with Disney and Southern California Edison being two well-known examples where U.S. IT staff were literally required to train the people taking their jobs, and that isn't a mistake but the exact loophole Abby is warning about, while Kevin keeps hyping up the idea of recruiting geniuses even though the numbers strongly contradict that image, because nearly 70% of H-1B filings are for positions categorized in the lowest two skill tiers, which means basic entry-level or routine tech work, and Ben calling some of it data entry isn't even an exaggeration because it appears right in government classifications, and that's not innovation but wage suppression, and the irony here is that Abby is actually arguing for a better designed system, not a reduced one, since right now rural hospitals, scientific labs, and growing biotech companies, the sectors where shortages truly hurt, are pushed aside by massive outsourcing firms that overwhelm the H-1B lottery with huge piles of bulk applications. And while Kevin treats competition for talent like some theoretical discussion, Abby is focused on the real workers in critical industries that get sidelined when the system is abused, and honestly, that's the part of this whole debate that deserves much more attention.
There's an argument to be made that more of those visas should be available for rural hospitals, should be available for people in the life sciences, should be available for researchers, should be available to the geniuses in other fields.
So let me go back to the core here.
I think that's a fair argument.
My whole point is, at the end of the day, it's a competition globally, and it's between two giant economies, China and the United States of America.
And I go with America.
And listen, there's nobody else that compares in terms of the size of the economies. Right now, why is Zuckerberg paying $100 million for 10 years for one AI scientist? Because we don't have enough of them in America. Say there's a kid or a woman in Pakistan that is 14 years old that's clearly a math genius.
Yeah.
And we're going to say, no, you go to China and we'll compete with you later. How about we bring them into this country like we did in the 50s? Like, how screwed up is this?
I totally
Nobody's arguing against this.
Yeah, I don't know
why are you guys so against Donald Trump changing a little bit on this? You guys are mad at Trump for actually adapting to what we're discussing right now.
I think you're arguing with yourself.
I'm not arguing myself. I promise you. There's a Trump document on this. All right, I'll explain in 5 seconds. The Trump document.
You have never explained anything in 5 seconds.
Well, listen carefully, don't interrupt, and maybe you'll get it in 5 seconds.
But hold on a second.
You ready? Let somebody get a stopwatch. I'll make it that simple.
The reason you're arguing with yourself is because we're trying to have a conversation about policy, and you keep wanting to make this about whether Donald Trump is right or wrong.
Because you guys don't understand Trump policy, and I'm trying to explain to you. Trump's policy is simple. When you have 20 million people that break into this country, or 15 million, he doesn't like that. He wants skilled workers to come in the right way.
Was he wrong in 2016 when he was against H-1Bs?
This is literally why I don't understand why you guys hate him so much.
I can give you a list. But I need a lot more than 5 seconds.
And Donald Trump changes and adapts and becomes president.
I don't like him because of racism. I don't like him because he's
I know why you don't like him.
Sexual abuser.
I
don't like him because he's convicted.
I'm going to let Chris have a quick word because
should I continue?
I kind of think that this conversation is sort of going sideways because I know Ben really wants us to be fighting about Donald Trump, but really we're actually trying to have a conversation about immigration policy. So, okay.
Which involves the president wanting
let's
more
put Trump to the side for just a second, because again, the only people, I don't know, in this room, maybe there are no MAGA Republicans in this room who are opposed to H-1Bs, but there are some. Nobody disagrees with Trump that H-1Bs are actually a valuable asset. Not in this room, but some people in your party do. Separately, Chris, I wonder what you think of all of this.
Well, I wrote a book about Bobby Kennedy, so we'll get to that soon. We'll get to that soon. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out the vagaries of the MAGA movement. It seems like there are different directions. When I hear J.D. Vance, who I think is a person seeking to succeed Donald Trump, I think it's a fair assumption he'd like to be the next president, right? Why is he saying I don't like immigrants, per se? I don't want to put words in his mouth. He didn't say I don't like immigrants.
No,
don't. I'm not putting words in his mouth. He said he's against illegal immigration and legal, both.
There's too many.
He said
that's what he said. Don't put it's not words in his mouth. Did he come out against all kinds of immigration?
I think there's a policy movement in the Republican Party to reduce overall immigration levels.
It's honestly unbelievable how Kevin and Ben keep trying to twist a discussion about immigration policy into some kind of loyalty test for Donald Trump, while Abby and Anna are the only ones keeping the conversation tied to what's actually happening in the real world, and the reality is the facts clearly back them up, because Kevin's non-stop, "We need this to beat China" argument falls apart the second you look at what Abby and Anna are pointing toward, which is the fact that the U.S. actually loses top-level talent when the system gets flooded with massive outsourcing firms submitting tens of thousands of low-wage applications, and in 2023 alone the government confirmed that nearly half of all H-1B lottery filings came from just a few companies, almost all outsourcing giants, not hospitals, not research institutions, and definitely not the next groundbreaking scientist. Which is exactly why rural regions and high-end research programs end up starved for visas, and Ben trying to insist these are all advanced tech jobs completely ignores federal data showing that more than 60% of approved positions fall into wage level 1 or 2, the lowest categories, meaning basic entry-level roles, routine tasks, and yes, sometimes nothing more than dressed-up data entry, and that doesn't build a nation of innovators, it just pushes down wages across multiple industries. And the funniest part is Kevin pretending the GOP is fully united on this topic when the MAGA faction, J.D. Vance, Stephen Miller, and several House Republicans, has openly pushed for slashing legal immigration across the board, not just high-skill visas but all of it, which isn't competition at all but isolationism disguised as patriotism. And Abby and Anna are simply calling out the obvious truth that you can fully support legal immigration while still demanding a system that isn't abused by the biggest tech companies, because they're not anti-innovation, they're pro-fairness, pro-strategy, and frankly far more in touch with how these policies actually impact people than the men yelling over them.